condominium corporations, and our current bylaw didn't allow that. So we were making some modifications to allow it, but not for all condominiums, only for certain ones.
So if I look at number 5 under that bylaw, which is on page 194, it says that the effective date of this bylaw shall be the date of passage, which is July 11th, today. So is there a budget for the pickup of condominium garbage, and when will this take effect?
Through the mayor,
the actual pickup.
through the mayor to council, there was not a budget amendment done, but staff were directed to implement it as soon as possible. With respect to that, once this bylaw passes this evening, we actually have the package to be distributed to the condominium corporations available to do that. So it will be immediately distributed, and then it'll be up to the condominium corporations to apply and go through the application process. So I can't say how long, but we'll be able to distribute that package tomorrow, and provided that the condominium corporations are able to meet the criteria and provide the required amount of information, as soon as they have all of that, we'll be starting collecting for them.
So we are not waiting till January 1st, 2018?
Absolutely not. That wasn't the direction from council.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to rule your question out of order, Councillor Columbus. Back to the bylaw. That's nothing to do with condo. Any other questions? If not, those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. Balance of the bylaws, moved by Columbus, seconded by Height, that bylaws 2017-78 through 2017-85 inclusive, and that bylaw 31Z 2017 be passed, signed by the mayor, fixed with the corporate seal. Any questions on these bylaws? I'll start with Walls and then Columbus. Page 195, continue.
Individuals who can enforce bylaws. So my question is, what do all of these 60 people do? And secondly, is this just part of their job, or are they paid extra for this, or could I have a little explanation of that, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I'll jump in, and then perhaps Mr. Grizel can help bring us home. So each of the staff here, they fulfill different obligations as part of their statutes of their job. So in the case of a building inspector, they're actually enforcing statutes. So they're required to be appointed by bylaw in order to enforce, to be able to do their job. So we've got a list here. Myself is included. We've got our conventional bylaw officers. There's forest conservation bylaws, so our forestry people are here. We've got a number of road supervisors that have obligations to ensure, so perhaps obstruction bylaws, things like that. These people are authorized to issue charges. Whether they do or they don't is something perhaps that respective general manager could speak to. I'm looking here at water, drainage. There's a number of different acts and legislation that require them to be formally appointed. So perhaps maybe Andy, you could add to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer the other side of your question, getting on this list doesn't mean that you get a pay increase. So I think that's the important aspect that you're concerned about. It's just a list to make sure that they have the proper authority to do the work that they sometimes very occasionally may need to do.
Thank you. Any other, oh, sorry, Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a question with respect to bylaw to govern the procedures of council in its page 226 of the agenda package. At the bottom there, 17.3, it says, when a motion is under debate, no other motion shall be in order except the motion to proceed beyond the hour of 10:30 p.m. That should be 9 p.m., I believe.
Yes, good catch.
Yes, sorry, we thought we had made all of those changes, so I'll use I have authority to make a typo correction, and I'll correct that. If
there's any other questions, I have two. Mr. Baird, if I may, or Andrew. First of all, I was curious why the explanatory note to bylaw 2017-78, with those two individuals, the addition of are already on the previous one. I don't know the rationale why. It doesn't really matter. They're just listed on both lists. I don't know. Why just the two of them listed twice?
Which individuals,
Well,
Mr.
if you
Mayor?
look on the back of page 198, Andrew Cummings and Marie Cook Potter are there, but they are also, Maria's on the bottom of page 196, and Andrew's on the top of 196. So I don't know if that's just a duplication or not. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I would defer to Mr.
Well, we'll see if
Grisel.
Mr. Grisel knows why.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I'll try to attempt at it. I think the explanation note isn't part of the bylaw proper, so
Okay.
it's just an explainer to
That's fine.
summarize what changes occurred in
Well,
the
as long
bylaw.
as you're happy with it. The other one I have, and again, it's just housekeeping, but I noticed on page 196, the fourth person up from the bottom, our assistant fire chief retired on June of the 30th. So I just wondered why he's being reappointed. Should he be there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we always do a circulation of this list, but usually what happens is it takes us about a month or two to get all the comments back when we do the circulation. So I think when we did the initial circulation, they probably didn't want him removed, and in the interim between when it came in here, he has since retired. But we update this list every year, so
I'm not
next year
worried
it'll
about
be
it. I'm
fixed.
just curious, and I just don't want to get a ticket from somebody from Norfolk County that isn't employed in Norfolk County. Any other questions? Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We'll go now to page 247. We have two motions to deal with. This is a motion from Councillor Height with respect to disbandment of the Legacy Fund Committee. At present, I have Councillor Height's signature as the mover. I have no seconder. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brunton has seconded. And this is moved and seconded that bylaw 2015-95, our bylaw to establish the Legacy Fund Advisory Committee policy and make appointments thereto, it be repealed in its entirety, and that staff be directed to present to council and committee upon the Legacy Fund annually to address areas which are not limited but include, and they are listed there. There are 5 of them. I'm actually not going to read them. I've read them. And further, that council reaffirm their position of 2015, being that the initial principal amount of the Legacy Fund of $67,708,000 change remain intact, and only the interest incurred through investments of this amount be utilized. Councillor Height,
Thank you, Mayor.
on the motion that's on the floor,
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple changes in there that I just noticed in that.
you can go over them if you wish.
Yes, thank you, sir. Upon the Legacy Fund annually to address areas, I'd like to have that annually or as required or as sooner, so that we're not limiting it to an annual report.
Okay, I will add the words after annually in the first paragraph, or as required. I think that covers any before,
Right.
after, how many times, frequency, whatever.
Yeah, sounds good to
Thank
me.
you.
And then line 5.
Yes.
Reviewing the excess investment earnings and making recommendations to council. Well, my motion here would have council discussing it right on the floor, so we wouldn't have to make recommendations to ourselves.
Well, if I may, I think that at the top of the motion, you're saying it be brought to council of committee, so I think it makes sense that recommendations be made at that time from committee to council.
Okay,
Okay? I mean, it's going to end up at council anyhow.
sure.
I mean, I think either you do it at council or committee.
Okay, it just sounds convoluted, but no
Yeah.
big deal.
Well, the top part says that the
Yeah, I
staff be
see
directed
that.
to present council in committee, so that's why I think that's there, okay?
Okay. Really what this report does is, right now we have a committee that deals with the legacy fund of $67 million. I'm not looking to change it where we're going to spend any money. We're looking to secure that money still and carry on with that. What I am looking for is for that conversation to take place in the public. Right now, that's not how it works, and I'm also looking for all of council to have input into that. I feel the public deserves to listen to our conversation on that and possibly lobby us to spend it in certain corners, who knows? But it should be out in the public's eye, and we, as a body, should make those recommendations. I value the input from each and every one of the people around this table, including you, Mr. Mayor, even though you're not at this table. And so I think that's the dynamic of the whole council here. And when it's limited to just a few people, I feel that we're missing out on some things like that. We handle reports. We just went through the reserve and reserve fund, some 67-page report. And honestly, this report's a 3 or 4 pager. We'd eat that up like nothing. And yeah, there will be a lively discussion, I'm sure, and then the public can hear it as well. And other than that, I don't have a lot of stuff. Like, one of my concerns with the legacy fund is we're not accounting for inflation. So every year that goes by where we don't account for inflation, we lose money. All right? Looking over our investments, some of our bond performances, they're weak. I'm not even clear why we have them, because I think we're losing money on them. We might be better to hold our own debt, considering we're paying 3% interest on that side of things. And you know, personally, I feel like we had a really good report come to us just today, and I really think that the county manager and the treasurer are going to be moving forward with the financial reporting so much better. I was going to suggest an audit and finance committee, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to let the county manager and the treasurer work that out, and maybe in the fall or a later time, see what they suggest. I'll let them do their jobs. But really, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking to have this put up to the public and in front of all of council for them to make that decision. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Then Brunton.
Mayor Luke, I guess with that rationale, we can disband all of our committees then. Through you to James, I'm assuming that Councillor Height has conferred with you and to come up with some of these recommendations. Usually it's we have staff input, so I'm making that assumption, and I'd just like to hear from you what you have to say about this. I wondered, you know, why did we put this committee in place to begin with? I know it was a recommendation from Mr. Ford, and there was a rationale, and I wondered if our new treasurer has changed his mind after conferring with Councillor Height, so I'll look to James for
Response,
some
Mr.
response.
Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did prepare a small response seeing the motion. I have not spoken to Mr. Height about this specific motion. Normally, I would agree with not having a committee if we don't need one. It makes sense to me. We had that discussion a few weeks ago. However, I believe after I give you my opinion on this, you'll understand. I've reviewed the legacy fund policy, previous reports, and also contacted the previous treasurer to further research the intent of the policy. The consistent message I've seen, and I'm glad to see that as part of Councillor Height's motion, is to maintain the principal balance of $67.7 million. Without this revenue generator, amongst other things, we would lose one of the 5 steps mentioned earlier to repair the roads reserve. When speaking to the previous treasurer, he stated one of the major reasons for having this subcommittee is so that the one fund representative can come and sit down with us and have a more candid conversation with the members of the committee on the investments. There are details of the investments, dollar amounts, specific areas where we're investing in that they would not present at a public meeting. Call it trade secrets, call it whatever you want. The investors have their own strategies on investments, and they would be able to let it, the subcommittee, they would be able to let us know what those investments are. Everything else that comes from the committee are brought to council for approval, as I understand it. So if there's some recommendations from the committee brought to council, it could be challenged or discussed then. There is in the policy, there is the last page of it, you'll see lots of information that are required through the policy to bring to council. It's information that's brought to the committee first, and then that same information is brought to council. The other concern I have is there's a lot of things in the policy, and the way the motion is read is that the policy would be disbanded as well. So there are items there that has me concerned if it's not written down or governed in any such way. Items like, even though it's in the motion, but it's also in the policy, identifying the principal amount to secure. Ensuring this is a long-term strategy to take advantage of the interest earnings. Preserving the investment guidelines. Ensuring that the investment representative is part of the committee. Items like the retention reserve and allocation of interest for capital purposes and guidelines for the allocation of the excess investment earnings are all written in this policy. If we disband the policy, it's not in our bylaws, it's not anywhere. And the last thing I'd like to say is, I believe the current policy and committee is working. It has a structure for accountability and transparency. There hasn't been any issues that I am aware of from the current setup. If there is information that council feels we're not providing to the table, then I would be happy to discuss that. And that's what I have to say, unless there's any questions. Thank you.
Well,
Councillor Black, thank you.
Yeah, Mayor Luke, I appreciate that. And I guess I would have assumed that a councillor would speak to the treasurer about something as big as this, or so I'm a little bit disappointed that way, that a councillor doesn't go to staff and confer with them first. So I'm glad I asked our treasurer, and based on what he has to say, I can't support this motion. And I think he's right. It is working, and to do anything other than that, there are things in here or that are in the existing policy that haven't been accounted for in this motion. And that's why I'm disappointed that the councillor did not confer first with our staff, or else maybe could have designed something a little bit more functional. There's no way I could support this motion.
Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. First and foremost, my concern all along has been where we invest that money. And I talked to James about it. I have every member of council here. I've harped about Haldeman. I've harped about the LPRCA, who are investing in other areas, not just the one fund, that are making a lot more money. I think the struggle for this council in years ahead, the way we've been jumping around spending money on new issues, is going to be to keep that legacy fund intact. There's going to be all kinds of pressure to get money out of there, I think. I, for one, like the legacy fund, but I do agree with Councillor Height. It's not, I'm not saying disband the legacy fund at all. I'm just saying I think it's this council's duty to decide and look at everything that happens with that fund, where it's invested and what types of bonds or equities, whatever we may be investing in. And I think everybody around this table should look at it and understand it. That's my hope anyways. I hope at some point you're coming forward with a report on the possibility of looking at other investments, as I've discussed with you, but I'm leaving that with you. But as far as the committee, I think when they brought some recommendations for us, we changed everything anyways. We decided what we wanted to do with the money. So you're right in one respect. There's a lot of committees we could do without here, plain and simple. But this one, it's just, to me, it's a step we don't need, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wells?
Well, what I would see this is, if we as council are debating where the money is to be allocated, that would be televised and all the public would be in tune as to what the legacy fund is, where it is invested, and I think it would be a good exercise. And I do appreciate that, and I certainly don't see why we would keep our light under a bushel. This is one of the highlights of what we do here. Thank you.
Any
Mr. Mayor.
further discussion? Councillor Black?
I would suggest that if there is support for this motion, that it be fine-tuned further, like given back to staff for them to review. So it is designed so there are no problems or anything hidden in it that could come back to bite us. So at the very least, if council wants to support this and for it to come forward and the committee be disbanded and it functions around this table, please let the treasurer review it first.
Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I did speak with staff about it. I spoke with our clerk because he's the writer of motions. We went over the policy. It doesn't say that staff is limited here not to bring things forward upon the report presentation. Bring whatever you want. I don't care. Give me some options. Right now, I want the options at council, or council and committee, whatever you want to call it, here, right here around this round table with all of the input from us. That's all I'm asking for. Not a few councilors and a few other staff members or the one people in a back room somewhere. The public needs to know what's going on with their money. Staff, feel free to bring whatever you want. I didn't say anything about slaughtering that policy off. We're keeping the funds in place. Let's have the discussion where it belongs, and that's in the public.
I'm going to call the question if there's no further comments. Those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. One more motion. This is from Councillor Wells. And it goes like this, because I don't have a seconder, so I'll just read it out loud. I'll get a seconder, then we'll turn it over to you, Councillor Wells. This says that, this resolution says that after the approval of the levy-supported budget, staff be directed to cease any request for a budget amendment unless the request is an emergency, mandated, or 100% funded from a source other than the levy, and that in all cases where a budget amendment is brought forward, the request contain a letter of statement of support from the county manager. Do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Geisens, I'll open it for discussion. Councillor Wells, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think everybody around this council table knows how strongly I feel about this particular item. That, you know, I've had many dealings at budget time. We sit around this table, we fight, we argue about $10. It's a struggle. We still allow staff to present their requests to us, and then finally, we make a decision. And that decision is how much we are going to put on the levy. And we're done the budget. And then what annoys me most is after we do that, then all of a sudden, and while we're doing that, and you've all been part of it, $100, $1,000. My golly, it's important when we're doing the budget. Holy Christmas, we debated a long time. Once the budget is passed and we appease our ratepayers, then all hell breaks loose and we can spend whatever we want. I just don't think it's fair. And that's what the motion is all about. I'm not saying we can't. It's very clear. It says that if there is an emergency, if there is a mandated or 100% funded program, bring it to us and we'll debate it. But not everything should be done when we have passed the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion? Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly don't disagree with Councillor Wells. You would hope that with all the resources that we have, that our budgets would be a lot closer than what they actually are when it comes to surprises, I'll call them. One of the issues that I have down here is where at the first paragraph, that it says, staff be directed to cease any request for a budget amendment unless the request is an emergency mandated or 100% funded from a source other than the levy. So technically, that wouldn't qualify for the stretchers because we just debentured all that. Or if we use a negative reserve account and then just do the omnibus debentures at the end of the year like what we've been doing, it can sidestep this whole process. So I'm not sure if that wording is going to accomplish what the member is looking to get done. I'm not sure how we can go about fixing that, if you'd be open to that, but you know, we can't take big hits like that. I totally agree. That's not how budgets are run. And yeah, there's emergencies and there's some other funding or even some grant programs that could help it out. Maybe the county manager could share how we could come up with something that prevents the basics of this motion or this caveat from being left in there.
No answer I give will make you happy in this regard. This is an ill-conceived motion. This is a $179 million corporation, which if it passes this motion will put handcuffs on itself and make itself largely incapable of governing in any number of circumstances that can't be foreseen. This council has the capacity to say no. The word is no. Don't like the staff report? No. Don't like the spending recommendation? No. Think it's a poorly conceived staff concept? No. Think it's wasting tax resources? Say no. But do not fetter the professional management team you employ here. You employ all of us to make good decisions and to give you the best advice possible. We are quite uncommon in Ontario in we have what's called a contingencies reserve. It really ought to be called opportunities and contingencies reserve, because frankly, good things happen too. It's not always negative. It isn't always a disaster. The stretchers were a good opportunity, which a majority of this council backed, that couldn't be brought at the normal time. A majority of you supported that. Therefore, we should all consider it a good decision. The bottom line is, if it was ill-conceived or improper, vote no. But do not create a system where in any good idea, something that happens at an irregular time, something we can't foresee, a business opportunity, an investment opportunity, whatever it happens to be, can't be brought forward to you because it falls afoul of this motion. We are a $179 million corporation with 750 staff. We operate in more than a dozen businesses. I can't tell you what next year's going to bring, or the year after, or the year after that. I can tell you, though, that this is handcuffs. So to be abundantly clear, the county manager has no advice that's going to help a motion that will lead to a stranglehold on its capacity to govern its own affairs. Put me down as undecided.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Well, what do we say to that? But like, I don't necessarily see it that way though, because unless it's coming from the levy, you can still bring it forward to us the way it's worded here. You can use negative reserve accounts, you can use debt funding options, you can use a bazillion different options, you just can't take it from the levy. And that's where we're saying no.
Appreciate it.
You want a response?
Although I'm not allowed to debate with the member.
You want a response? Because we're not going to get in debate.
I'm waiting.
Okay, you'd like a response, so if you wish to response?
This council, we are bringing more financial reports. This council has not made a decision that the majority of its future spending should come from debt. It may choose levy, it may choose to spend more of our dwindling reserves, but this decision implies and strongly encourages us to take actions that only result in increased future debt, because the councillor is correct that it would be a mechanism we could still use. So we couldn't even suggest levy spending. You have three options. It never makes good sense in the default to take away one of your options. You just have less decision-making capacity and less room to maneuver. For that reason, we wouldn't normally constrain ourselves by voluntarily putting handcuffs on.
Councillor Black?
Well, certainly, county manager made his position very clear, so, and I do appreciate that, and I tend to agree. It does put handcuffs on staff, and he is right. Whatever comes to this table, it's a decision by the members around here. So I still have the opportunity to say no, just as the county manager indicated. I think it does. By doing something like this, I think it does constrain our corporation, and I think it is incumbent upon staff to bring things forward, present them to us, and as decision makers, we have the ability to say yes or no. So I won't support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Brunton.
As council, we are required, Mayor Luke, to bring notices of motion. It takes 2 or 3 weeks to get something here at times to discuss. Maybe we should ask the county manager to bring a notice of, I'm going to bring in a report in 2 or 3 weeks, and it's going to, oh, by the way, I'll be bringing in my entourage, and I'm the lead actor, like you did with the ambulance issue and the stretchers. If we had notice of that, maybe we could have changed our thinking on how we handled it. That's my look at it. We always seem to get caught here, just like with it's either the firemen or the EMS staff. They come in, their entourage, and sit here, and all of a sudden, that day I came here, I had no idea what was going on. Somebody said show up early for a meeting, and I come up here, and there's how many EMS people out there? Caught me by surprise. Yet we have to give a notice of motion that takes 3 weeks or 2 weeks to get on the table. So maybe it should work both ways. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion says staff be directed to cease any request for a budget amendment. But there have been times where a councillor actually asked the question for a budget amendment to add certain projects or that type of thing. So maybe this is worded, maybe they should say staff or a councillor, include the councillors. Because I recall there have been times where we've had to change the budget and add money because of a request from council.
Thank you. Not my motion. Okay, are we ready to call the question? We are. I've read the motion. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion is defeated. We have no closed session this evening, no notices of motions. Before we get to other business, there are some action items listed there. We do not need to have a motion on those. If you want to speak to them under other business, certainly I'll entertain that. Okay, let's go to other business. I'm going to start with staff. James?
I have nothing to add, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I got a feeling that Ms. Webb has no other business.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. I have no other business this evening.
Not so sure with Mr. Baird. Mr. County Manager.
Just to inform council that over the summer and probably into well into August, into September, the clerk and I will be working on a number of documents for your consideration. Those will include proposed amendments to the Code of Conduct, documentation, and possibly up to and including an RFP for a potential integrity commissioner, and a document that will dictate or describe idealized staff-council relations. These 3 initiatives are now statutorily mandated as a result of the passage of Bill 68. So we'll put our heads together, and as between us, I would imagine, come up with some documents that should provoke some thought, but we'll have certainly a number of pieces that I would describe as governance issues for your consideration in the late summer to early fall period. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Robinson.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Arlene Miranda.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Bill Cridlin.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Grizel.
Just a reminder to our viewing public that we'll be off the air until August 15th unless there's a special meeting called.
Thank you very much. Councillor Height, other business, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On our calendar, it looks like I got 2 TDAB meetings on the 24th and the 26th. Seems excessive, Mr. Grizel. Do you know which day is correct?
My apologies, I'll have my staff look into it, I'll get right back to you.
Okay. And we'll get that one figured out. Now, I would like to draw council's attention to our information package. There was a discussion we had a while back about transportation costs for medical travel. The sum came in at a whopping $451,703 for Norfolk County share. I'm thinking we may need to allocate some of that money to the Ride Norfolk, and we'll just have the med bus, maybe we'll call it, or something, and take people to their appointments. It's on page 19 at the top. Expenditures, I see that eventually this will be coming, or all done by the municipality, or by the province, I mean. So we won't have to, wow, that's just crazy expensive for that package. I'm almost sorry we asked. All right. Next up on my list, Mr. Mayor, is we have a building on these grounds. I believe it's empty where planning used to be. Is that not correct? Or has staff found a way to fill that facility? It's been brought to council a few times, and we haven't filled it yet.
Bless you. Marlene Watson worked for...
Mr. Mayor, I believe the building is vacant. Perhaps SLT, we can have a discussion. I know there's some temporary uses that were contemplated, but I'm not aware of it specifically. But we could certainly follow up and inform council.
I know we get rent for the other building. It seems like we should maybe get rent. And
Councillor Height, if I may, my memory is like Councillor Wells, it's not good, but did we not authorize staff to go ahead and see if we could get a commercial person in there? I'm sure we did. There's something on file, but again, I'm not 100% sure, but I thought that...
I thought we said no, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay, I thought we said yes, Mr. Councillor.
I thought it was only our staff that
Okay,
wanted that
well,
spot.
we'll
but
get staff to look into that. If Chris, if you would
that would
make note of that. Thank you.
That, Mr. Mayor, if you would be an ideal facility for the Simcoe BIA. And when you look at their financials that we saw a few weeks ago, it probably wouldn't hurt their bottom line. So just an option out there. And next up, I had the unfortunate experience of having to leave Norfolk County twice last week. And as I don't like leaving, Mr. Mayor, I'm funny like that. So I'm driving up Highway 24, and I think it was around where that John Deere dealership was. Is there not a, or where that greenhouse operation is? Is that the 13th, Harold? Or is it the 8th? Is it?
Are you over the
I think
overpass?
so.
Pardon?
Yeah, I think so.
If you
over
are,
the
that's
overpass.
the
It was hard to see, Mr. Mayor, because
That's
there was,
Regional Road 9, former concession 8,
there was
right?
2 cars in front of me, and the first one turned his signal light on, the second car slammed on his brakes, so all I was seeing was the back end of brake lights and white knuckles on the steering wheel. And when we stopped, there was a turning lane that's about 10 feet where everybody just drove off of the road anyway onto the gravel. And I know in the west end at Highway 24 and 59, we build roads right, so there are turning lanes properly. That should be something that gets looked at up Highway 24, because I don't know how there's not smash-ups all the time up there. There was a long line of cars.
Lee, that, if you'll respond, I believe that's ministry territory?
Absolutely. That is a provincial highway, and we'd be happy to forward a letter to the MTO if you would like.
Okay.
That would be swell.
Sounds like perhaps some driving too close.
What's that, Mr. Mayor?
Nothing. Sorry. I was just mumbling.
I thought not. Okay, so as you're aware, we had our Conservation Authority meeting the day after council, and we had the walk-on report that dealt with the lakeshore safety strategy, and we passed it at the Long Point Region Conservation Authority. That's how we move, Mr. Mayor. Lickety split up there now. We waited a long time for that report, and we put it right through. So no more hearings, we appreciate everybody's help on that, getting that
Thank you.
taken care of to the best of our ability. And now that we have the evacuation plan, have a great summer. I hope we don't need it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brunton, please.
Couple of questions through you to staff, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I had an individual from the condominium development down on, behind the commercial development on Queen Street. And I finally got the application today, or in my mail on Friday. That's the commercial site on the corner, that'd be the
Southeast.
southeast corner. And I'll get to their question, but I noticed in the application quite a few variances there, and they're large. And I wondered what the people are asking. They can go to the meeting, but what is their recourse if committee approves that?
Mr. Baird, this is going to Committee of Adjustment.
Yes, yes.
Well, POMB, I'm sure. Go ahead.
Council's delegated that decision-making authority to the Committee of Adjustment, but it's still a land use decision, and it would be appealable, and they could exercise their right through that route.
So it'd be a long process in terms they'd have to go and hire their professional help.
Correct, yeah.
I mean, I did read it, and I see there's fairly large requests for variances. Wow. Okay. Anyways, my next question, I guess, through you to Lee is, Lee, in my conversations yesterday with an individual involved with the development across from Concert Automotive, you know, the commercial condominium outlet they have on the highway?
Yes?
This the proposed plaza?
Yes.
Yes, I'm familiar with that, yes.
Okay, well, his comment to me, and I asked him the question, are you required to widen the highway there? Is that a condition of that development?
Through the mayor to council, absolutely. Their traffic engineer recommended that the highway be widened.
Okay, my question then, I guess, when I heard that is, how will that be dealt with? I know they aren't approved yet, at least that's what he told me, and I'm wondering how, with the Queensway paving in August last week, I think he told me, how will that be dealt with? Are you tying that in somehow, or can we not do that until he gets his final approval?
Through the mayor to council, we have been pushing the developer to enter into an agreement for that so that we could actually do it on their behalf at the same time, so that we're not digging up brand new work, and that's what we would prefer to do. But again, it's typically we would enter into an agreement with the developer, and the developer would do that at their cost with their contractor. We are recommending that the developer enter into an agreement to pay us for the money that we spend to do that, so that we can do all the work at the same time, so that it's actually a better looking end product. But we seem to be having difficulties with the developer and getting an agreement from them for that work.
Okay, well, that was my concern, and when I heard about it, and I certainly hope it happens, because it's going to make us look awful foolish to pave it and then tear it up if they do decide to go ahead. So thank you for
Absolutely, we concur.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Thank you, Councillor Sonnenberg.
Mr. Mayor, my concern is marijuana grow-ops. I got a call from a person who lives directly across the road from the most recent bust in the Renton area. He wanted to know what constitutes a legal grow-op and an illegal. And to be honest, I didn't know. I thought the only legal production of marijuana was for medicinal purposes, and we regulate them. You know, they have to be a certain distance away, and they have to be fenced, and they have to be lit, and all this kind of stuff. I thought those were the only legal marijuana grow operations. But then, do individuals not have the right to grow a certain number of plants legally? What really bothers me is we had 4 grower operations in the Villanova area. 3 were in houses. 1 was in a greenhouse operation, and the police knew about all of them, but they never did anything about it. So I have to wonder, I have to ask, what constitutes legal versus illegal? Can you help me out there, Mr. Baird?
Mr. Baird, I'll let you take a shot at this.
Yeah, I'll try my best. Okay, so we have, in our zoning bylaw, we have certain requirements, so that if it is a legitimate, I would say like a large-scale grow operation, it's all been approved by Health Canada, it's licensed. American is one such example, and Mayor Luke mentioned that tonight, large operation. So those have all those requirements, fencing, security, and so on. Those are legal. We do have the Health Can, I guess, with that medicinal marijuana. And again, I'm by no means an expert. You're allowed to grow if you have a physician, I believe it's a physician's note or something to that. You're allowed to grow for yourself or for someone else, but I believe it's a certain quantity. And it's done on a per property basis. We're seeing now some properties seeking a second civic address so that they can effectively double. But, and then anything beyond that would be deemed illegal. And that's what our OPP are dealing with all over. It might be a good question to have brought up in the next Police Services Board meeting. They're certainly, from a law enforcement perspective, they're well up to speed on that. But we do receive complaints from individuals through bylaw, about someone's growing or whatever. And I mean, it's not for us to determine who's licensed or not, but usually, it's the odor or the noise or some of these things that aggrieves neighbors. So, with that, we can certainly look into it further. But I would suggest maybe Police Services Board would be a good next step. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to thank Candy for all her years of service and wish her well in her retirement from the county, that is. And just to make note that when you look back, we did not have very many labor disruptions over the 17 years, so I commend her for negotiating those QP contracts and all those things. She's come a long way to relieve a lot of pressure from council. And wishing everybody a safe and happy summer recess.
Thank you very much, Councillor Columbus, and you as well. Councillor Black?
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and I just received an email here about the Ice Cream Fest. So that's happening July the 29th and 30th at Wellington Park. And I didn't see it on the information package memo, so was this late coming in? I mean, it's asking for the road closure, and staff have been delegated that responsibility, have they not? So it's not a problem for the Ice Cream Fest. I don't know if maybe Andy can answer that or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council has a policy, and there is a policy that allows the pre-existing special events to have road closures approved by the manager of roads.
Okay.
So it's only in the first year of any event that we need to bring them forward to council for approval.
All right. Well, I just saw, didn't see it on the memo, and it just came in as an email, so I wanted to make sure that they get the road closed there. It's a good event for the kids, lots of ice cream, and if you're around, try some.
Councillor Geisens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some good news. Everything is well in the West. So that's all I have. I have nothing to first to say. I hope you all have a very good vacation, I guess, and hopefully we don't get called back for a meeting. Thank you.
No. Okay, I just have 3 items. I'll be brief as always. I hope to be. The one thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and it's probably last minute, but I did receive a copy of a news release from our MPP, Toby Barrett's office, and it is as you're well aware of, Bill 148, I believe. Anyhow, the proposal to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour next year by our provincial government. Yeah, it's Bill 148. Anyhow, I just was asked if this council had taken a stand on this concern from a resident that brought this into my office this week. Was a good concern, I think, saying that a number of, especially, not so much small businesses, but that's part of it, but our farmers a lot of them cannot afford $15 an hour if we are taking any stand on this. And I said, at this point, this is the first time I certainly have read in the paper that this was being proposed, but I know, according to Mr. Barrett's memo here, that discussions and hearings are starting to take place July 4th. So anyhow, I did want to bring that to your attention, that there was a concern that with Norfolk County being such a lot of labor at the farm, and I said, I don't know how that affects the offshore workers, and I don't know enough about it. I haven't read anything on that. I had the privilege of attending, along with Councillor Columbus and Councillor Geisen and Councillor Height and Councillor Wells. I think I got everyone. The picnic at Bacchus on Saturday was a huge, huge success. Beautiful day. And I do want to thank the Port Rowan and Walsingham Heritage Society for the idea and their work. A lot of work setting this up. There was lots of entertainment. The LPRCA had the mill site and the grounds in absolutely immaculate condition. So passed on my thanks on behalf of Council, Mr. Chairman Height, to LPRCA. I did thank Cliff and Chuck, the groundskeeper, for their work. We did set the world record by having picnic tables that measured in length 1,061 feet, 9.5 inches, and we defeated the world's record by approximately 3 feet. The last item I have, then we'll get to the confirming bylaw. This morning I received, I believe you got a copy of the annual report from the Ontario, the Ombudsman of Ontario, Ontario's watchdog. I say that respectfully, because I don't consider the Ombudsman the bad guys at all. They help keep us doing things right. But this is our annual report. We are mentioned in here. I'm going to finish reading this. I find it interesting reading. Then I'm going to give it to the county manager to have a look at. And I just want to quote, I won't quote, as of March 2017, so we're back 4 or 5 months ago, out of the 444 municipalities, 218 municipalities in the province have had complaints filed and investigated by the Ontario Ombudsman. And approximately half of those 218 complaints were deemed to be illegal proceedings under Section 239 of the Municipal Act. And they also go on in there just to say, and there's lots of stuff, but I wanted to say that they mentioned that they have, and I quote, they had excellent cooperation was received from municipal officials. And the last thing I do want to quote from here, and they talk about all the municipalities, and it says, quote, we also found several procedural violations where councils closed meetings without giving information about the matters to be discussed before doing so, including Norfolk County, and it goes on to list 4 or 5 more. And we cautioned these councils not to stray from the topic cited in the resolution once they were in closed session. So I think we can relate to that a little bit. So anybody wants to read it later, it's interesting stuff, at least I think it is. Confirming bylaw, and before I get to it, have a safe and good vacation. We'll see you on the 15th of August. I need a seconder for confirming. Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Brunton has moved. Councillor Black seconded the bylaw 2786, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of Norfolk County be passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. Those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much for all your work. Thank you, staff. Mr. County Manager, thank you too.